Finally, we have had a political messiah from on high who is not bought and paid for by Goldman Sachs and who is going to drain that swamp.
So the nice part about me is that I don't have any of that stuff. I don't have it. I'm putting up my own. I'm not into Goldman Sachs. I don't care about Goldman Sachs.
Because what he wanted to do is say, I will protect you from Goldman Sachs. I will protect you from Citibank. And I will protect you for the banks because I'm Robin Hood and I'm this wonderful senator and I'm going to protect you for these banks. And then he's borrowing from the banks. And by the way, he's got personal guarantees and he got low interest loans. Got low interest loans, they're low interest. And now he's going to go after Goldman Sachs. Doesn't work that way. Goldman Sachs owns him. Remember that, folks. They own him.
And then he'll come and tell you about how he's going to protect you from the banks. Let me tell you, Goldman Sachs and Citibank have him totally under control, folks. Believe me, okay? He may talk, but believe me, they have him 100% under control. Me, I'm not taking money, so it's very easy, okay?
He talks about how he's going to get, well, Goldman Sachs, I know the guys at Goldman Sachs, they have total control over him. Just like they have total control over Hillary Clinton. They have total. But they have no control. They have no control over Donald Trump.
Drain the swamp. We're going to drain the swamp of Washington. We're going to have fun doing it. We're all doing it together. It is funny.
Wait, did he say drain the swamp or to fill the swamp as quickly as possible with as many members of Goldman Sachs as can possibly be stuffed into it?
Today, the Trump administration announced its fifth straight high-profile hire from Goldman Sachs. Just keeping track, the senior strategist at the White House, Goldman Sachs, the nominee to be Treasury Secretary, Goldman Sachs, the head of the National Economic Council, the president of Goldman Sachs, the head of the SEC, which is the top cop that polices Wall Street firms like Goldman Sachs. That'll be a former lawyer for Goldman Sachs. And now today, some new advisor job they created at the White House will be going to another partner at Goldman Sachs.
I'd like to get your thoughts on what we can tell so far about what Trump's relationship to the banking community is and what it might be as he tries to proceed with his restructuring of the American economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple right now what his relationship is because he has basically appointed a Treasury Secretary who is a former partner at Goldman Sachs, and as head of his Economic Council, the former president of Goldman Sachs, Gary Cohn, who actually was my boss's boss when I was at Goldman Sachs. He was one of the managing partners at the time of the FIC division, fixed income, currency, and commodities, so the area that traded, the area that took risk. And through that, he ultimately moved more up the firm into the president or number two spot at Goldman Sachs. So it's very clear what Trump's current relationship is with Goldman Sachs, which is that he has the number two guy at Goldman Sachs coming in as a major policy advisor for both domestic and foreign policy.
We've got Anthony Scaramucci, a former Goldman employee who will now serve as a senior White House advisor, Dina Habib-Powell, who heads charitable efforts for the firm. She'll be a senior counselor for economic initiatives. And then we have the Daily News explaining that they'll join White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, National Economic Council Chairman appointee Gary Cohn, and Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman nominee Jay Clayton as top Trump appointees who held senior Goldman positions. So this is a whole team. And I think the biggest point for me is, as you mentioned, had Clinton gotten into office, it would have been the same thing. Barack Obama did the same thing. Had Mitt Romney or John McCain won either of those years, it would have been the same thing, because Goldman Sachs has been lining all of their pockets. And it's just, in my opinion, an insurance policy plan to make sure that no matter what happens, they have some semblance or some degree of control over governance, which as I learned from your documentary on the Federal Reserve, is even more shocking to me because they already have control of the money supply. So the fact that they still need to go and they still want to be regulating and to be controlling the government itself, which they already control through the Fed, is just mind-boggling and as much total control as I could imagine of the financial sector.
Make America Goldman again. Yes, it may be a little premature to start the plans to dance on the grave of Government Sachs. Something tells me it's going to be around for at least another 4 to 8 years, or potentially much longer than that. And in the meantime, what do we get to be treated to on the nightly news other than former president and CEO of Goldman Sachs and current chief economic advisor to the Trump administration, Gary Cohn, telling us how great the Federal Reserve is, what a wonderful job it's doing, and how much we should respect its power.
Well, let me ask you about something that perhaps you're not so excited about. The Federal Reserve is almost certain to raise interest rates when they meet this week. Are you worried, excuse me, are you worried that if there is a series of rate hikes over this year and early next year, that could hinder economic growth?
Look, Chris, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and they operate as such. They have their economic data, which they look at, and they are trying to always modulate, economic growth with inflation, with the workforce. And I think the Federal Reserve has been doing a good job in doing that. The Fed will do what they need to do, and we respect the powers of the Fed.
A bile-inducing sight, to be sure, and one that we are going to be treated to at some length over the coming years. No end in sight.